Matthew 5:14. You are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. We illuminate the darkness of the world not by teaching, but by love. That is what Jesus means by light in these verses. Our love points people to Jesus. Jesus is teaching us in these verses to love unbelievers. We must love unbelievers long before we ever preach to unbelievers. Many Christians seem to think that their calling is to preach the gospel to strangers, to people they never met before. Many Christians seem to think their calling is to talk to friends and co-workers about Jesus constantly, even when it is not welcome. Many Christians seem to think their calling is to argue with unbelievers, to convince them, to argue with unbelievers and, quote, liberals on social media or in public, to criticize them, to correct them, to argue with them. But we are called to love unbelievers. That is the light that Jesus is speaking about in this passage. That is the light. We are called to love unbelievers. That is what points to Jesus. Stacy was a young woman, about 35 years old, with 3 children, a husband who worked outside the home. She worked in the home. One day she was at a grocery store and she ran into a younger woman that she didn't know, met her for the first time there. And this younger woman had 2 little boys with her. And as they began to talk, she realized the woman was not religious, but she seemed to be very lonely and very anxious. So as they continued to talk, she invited her over to lunch the next week. So Stacy invited her over to lunch and they came. And after a while, the meeting a few times like this, they became friends. And Stacy began to watch her kids when she was at work sometimes, a few times a week actually. And if one of her kids got sick, she would watch that child, take care of that child on the day when the child was sick, and while the younger woman went to work. And she even gave her money a few times. She gave her, one time she was short on rent and was afraid she was going to get evicted, and she gave her $200 just to help her a little bit so she could pay the rent. She had some of it but didn't have all of it. But they began to have lunch every single week, and Stacy would just listen to her, and Stacy would just talk to her and listen to what she was saying and love her and give her attention. And she never ever preached at her. Never ever pressured her with the gospel or anything like that. And then one day, after a very long time, one day the younger woman was feeling very emotional, and she said to Stacy, you are like my sister. You're like my sister. No one has loved me in the last few years. No one has loved me like you have loved me. You've loved me better than my own family, than my own mother or my own sisters. You're like a sister to me. And Stacy, her response was this: it's Jesus. It's Jesus in me. Jesus has changed me. If you knew me just 10 years ago, you would know that I've been completely changed by Jesus. And then after that, from time to time, they began to talk about Jesus. And eventually, Stacy invited her to church, and she came with her to church, began to go to church every week. And then one day, after many years of them being friends, Stacy saw her friend get baptized. Matthew 5:14, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. A town on a hill would be lit up with torches in the darkness of the countryside. In a time before there was any electric light, the town up on the hill could be seen, especially at night with its torches blazing. Deeds of love are like light in the darkness of the world. We are to stand out from the world like a city on a hill, like a light blazing in the darkness. We are to be as contrasted as light is with darkness. We are to stand out by our love. We are to be different. Not niceness, not good manners or saying you love someone, but love in actions. Love that blazes like fire in the darkness, different from everyone else around them. And if they ask us a question about our faith, about Jesus Christ, then we can answer those questions when we are asked. The next verse says this. Jesus says, "Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put the lamp on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house." Of course, these were one-room houses, right? Where the lamp would blaze and fill up the entire room, the entire house with light. When a Christian talks about Jesus and corrects unbelievers, but does not love them with a flaming love in the darkness, that Christian has put a bowl over the lamp. That's the idea here. When we do not love, it's like putting a bowl over the lamp of our witness. Many Christians talk. They talk about what they don't like. They talk about this. They talk about that. But the talk itself can be a bowl over the lamp. The lamp is love. The light is love. Many Christians talk at unbelievers instead of loving unbelievers with a real blazing love, not just some kind of niceness. They put a bowl on the lamp, covering over the lamp and putting out the darkness. And unbelievers do not see the light in the darkness. They do not see our love. Matthew 5:16. "In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." So we are being commanded to shine before others. Let your light shine before others. Shining before others is not showing off or play acting or pretending to be something to get attention. Shining before others is loving others. It means when we love another person, we shine before them. They see, when they're loved by us, they see the light in the darkness. Jesus is teaching us that the light of love will draw people who live in the darkness. When they see the light of love in us, the light of Jesus Christ in us, it will draw them to God. Loving Jesus' way can move even the most hardened unbelievers to faith. Even those unbelievers that resist sermons and intellectual arguments or constant badgering, they will be moved when they see our love shining like light in the darkness. Simon was an 8-year-old boy who decided to visit the old people in his neighborhood, the people who lived alone. He decided to visit them every week. There was one old man and 2 old women, and he called them Aunt Rose, Aunt Brenda, and Uncle Roy. And he would come and knock on the door, and he would bring them cookies or some kind of snack and some drawings that he had made, and he would talk to them. He would ask them questions, and they would tell him stories. They would show him things, and they had a wonderful time, and they looked forward to Simon's visits. It brightened up their day. Every week, he would come and sit with them for an hour. And Uncle Roy was not a believer, didn't go to church, hadn't really been to church since he was a little boy. But the love of Simon and the love of Simon's family for Uncle Roy drew him, drew his heart to God, drew him to the faith. And he actually asked one day if he could go to church with their family. And he did. And it wasn't too long until Uncle Roy, in his old age, in the last years of his life, put his faith in Jesus Christ. And it all began with Simon's light, with the light in the darkness of Uncle Roy's life, the light blazing of Simon and his family's love for him. Many Christians are turning people away from the faith by their lack of love. I have seen it so many times. People sometimes hate Christians because we obey Jesus, but often they hate us because we disobey Jesus. Because we disobey him and we do not love. We can only bring criticism toward others. Many Christians are unlit lamps because they are quenching the Spirit's work in them. If you repent of your sin and you seek to love others, the Spirit will give you love. The Spirit will light you as a lamp. And then Jesus will love people through you, and his light will be shining in you, and he will draw men and women to the Father.